So here we are, the Sunday after Easter. The tomb is empty. He lives. So now what? I thought over the next weeks that it would be good for us to explore what it means to be a people who follow a risen Lord. What does that look like in our lives? What difference does it make? And I'm calling this next sermon series over the next few weeks, You're Going to Need This. And each Sunday we're going to talk about some of the tools of the trade, the qualities and characteristics that I happen to think we who claim to follow a risen Lord need in our lives. And I plan to get specific. I want to talk about patience and how we need each other and new eyes and courage and sacrifice. But I thought today I would begin with Paul's own version of You're Going to Need This. It's in Colossians chapter 3. Now, Colossians as a letter was written mostly to deal with a controversy in a Gentile church that Paul did not start this congregation. And after listing some of the things of the do not do this on the list, in verse 12 of chapter 3, he moves into the positives. What he thinks we should be about doing, what Christians should be about. So listen with me here in chapter 3 to the list of what you are going to need. Writes, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in the one body, and be thankful. So listen to the list again. Compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience. Bearing with one another in our sorrows, forgiving one another, peace, thankfulness, and above all, love, which binds everything together. The first thing I want you to notice today is that when it says you, the Greek is actually plural. He's saying y'all, all y'all, be compassionate, peaceful, thankful. He's not speaking to the individual, he's speaking to the church as a whole. He's describing what church should be like, what community in a Christian community should be like. This is what he thinks Christians should be in the business of doing. Compassion, kindness, humility, patience, forgiveness, gratitude, thankfulness, love. Does that sound like church? Does that sound like Christians? I asked myself this week, I wondered if I just strolled into Walmart and started asking people, tell me what words you think of when you think of Christians, what they might say. I wondered if I read this list to them, if they go, oh, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about church. You're talking about Christians. I'm afraid, actually, that what I might hear are not those words. I might hear things like hypocritical, self-serving, judgmental. After Easter, I saw on social media a minister out of California was thanking a certain fashion company for sponsoring his Easter clothes. He tagged the company in his post so that all his church members could go out and get their preacher's wares. And I thought, I cannot imagine what Jesus would think about that. Actually, I could imagine what Jesus would think about. Just so you know, church, this robe is called the Rebecca. Black never goes out of style. I have been wearing it since May of 2004, since I was gifted it. You know, actually, I still remember well a conversation one night at UK Hospital when I was a chaplain on a night shift I got a call to come and request to a room. And I went to see this patient, and I looked in her medical file a little bit before I went in, and I knew that she was in her 30s, but she looked a lot older than that. And I knew that she had quite an extensive years of experience with addiction. And I knew that she was sick with cancer. And she had lived a very hard life. In fact, when I got into the room, she told me that she was currently homeless, sleeping most nights on a friend's couch when she would let her stay. And she was sick, very, very sick, and totally alone. I didn't see any signs of visitors in her room. And I figured that she had probably requested to see a chaplain to have company as much as anything else. And as grateful as I was to get her call, because most nights when you work in a trauma hospital on a night shift, you spend your time occupied with the worst and most extensive disasters and tragedies of the human sort, the stuff that just breaks your heart into a million pieces. And so we chatted that night about her health and life, and I tried to offer my own little 2 cents of wisdom that when she got released from the hospital, she should try to go to certain nonprofits that I knew could offer her some help. And she politely listened. And then we were talking about our lives, and she said, well, could I come to your church? And I enthusiastically said yes, wholeheartedly yes. Told her the name, told her where she could find it. And she looked at me and she says, well, everybody says that I'm welcome. Everybody says that I'm welcome. And why did I find myself struggling for words that night? The truth is, when I look at this list in Colossians, I'm not sure which one is more difficult. What about you? Thankfulness, well, we take so much for granted. Kindness, well, depends on the situation. Patience, well, some days. Forgiveness, oh, it's getting a little harder now. Compassion, love without strings attached, love. Now, before we despair too much about that list, I want to point out a second thing for you to notice today about this passage. It says, clothe yourselves with compassion. Clothe yourselves with love. In other words, we have to put on these characteristics. We just don't automatically get them downloaded at our baptism. We have to choose to put these things on. It's like we know exercise is good for us, but we have to choose to get out of bed and actually do it. We choose to put on kindness. We choose compassion. We choose forgiveness. We choose to love. As Colossians describes it, these are things we put on. All these outward things that we choose to do help us point towards the life of Jesus. Someone who lived his life for others. Someone who lived his life outwardly instead of turned inward. That is what it means to be the church. That's what it means to follow him. The great Disciples of Christ preacher, Fred Craddock, was once talking at a ministers' convention, and you might have even heard this before because it's been well publicized. He was talking about, in his youth, of how he imagined what it was like to give your life to Christ. And he writes, to give my life for Christ appears glorious. To pour myself out for others, to pay the ultimate price of martyrdom, I'll do it. I'm ready, Lord, to go out in a blaze of glory. We think giving our all to the Lord is taking a $1,000 bill and laying it on the table. Here's my life, Lord, I'm giving it my all. But the reality, he says, is that for most of us is that he sends us to the bank and has us cash in $1,000 in quarters. We go through life putting out 25 cents here, 50 cents there. Listen to the neighbor's kids' troubles instead of saying get lost. Go to a committee meeting. Give a cup of water to a shaky old man in a nursing home. Usually, giving our life to Christ isn't glorious. It's done in all these little acts of love, 25 cents at a time. It would be easy to go out in a flash of glory. It's harder to live the Christian life little by little over the long haul. Church, y'all, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, love, forgiveness. These are the qualities of what it means. It comes down to that old campfire song, they will know we are Christians by our love. They'll know we're Christians by our love. It is as simple and as hard as that. And I want for you in a moment just to think about that list. And instead of getting overwhelmed with it like I would, I want you to take one, just one of these. Which one do you need to work harder to put on in your life? Love, forgiveness, humility, compassion, patience, thankfulness. Which of these do you need more of in your life right now? Do you want to commit to being more patient with your own kids? Is it time for you to forgive a long-held wound of someone who hurt you? Is it time to forgive yourself for mistakes of the past? Maybe you recognize that what you need right now is a little dose of humility to help you through a work situation where your pride is getting in the way. Is it more compassion you need for a person or a situation? And if so, maybe your prayer this week is simply to pray for God to give you eyes to see them as God sees them, as a beloved child of God. Choose one of these words this week to put on, to clothe yourself in, and make it your prayer. You know, nobody saw the resurrection. There wasn't a single witness. Whatever happened in the actual tomb was between Jesus and God. And all the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all tell the story with an element of chaos and surprise and confusion on that first Easter day. And here we are, 2,000 years later. We can't even begin to prove this story is true. But it was never meant to be proven. It was meant to be lived. The only proof that we will ever have that this story makes any difference in the world is in the proof in our own lives. So take your $1,000 checks to the bank, lay it all on the table, and follow him with your life. Let's sing.